For this instalment, we speak to Tom Kelly OBE, who chaired the Stronger In campaign in Northern Ireland during the Brexit referendum, to reflect on the strategy and outcome of the Remain campaign, the wider forces that shaped the vote, and how Brexit has reshaped politics across these islands in the years since. Tom, thanks for joining us today. 10 years on from the decision to leave the European Union, a lot of political change since then, Tom. Looking back, how did you get involved in the campaign initially?
Well, initially, I rang Peter Mandelson to ask what was going on in Northern Ireland, and he said, well, I was going to ask you that. And it turned out that they had a campaign on the ground, but they were all working from their home. And he said, would you like to head it up? This was in February 2016. So
5 months out from the election.
So I had to reshape the campaign, get them an office, high street office, make them much more street focused, and to bring in a wider group of people to actually form the central committee of the Remain campaign and Stronger in Europe, and manage the relationships between the five parties who supported Remain at that stage.
And were you able to manage those relationships with the five parties?
It was difficult at times because obviously I have a political background, and for some of those, I say particularly for Sinn Féin, I had run the campaign in West Belfast against Gerry Adams with Joe Hendon,
yes.
And I don't think they ever forgave me, but they worked pretty much with me on this, as did the Ulster Unions. The problem the Ulster Unions had basically was staying on message because their old brigade effectively were coming out saying that they were for leave,
yes.
And Mike Nesbitt was arguing passionately to remain, but he was a bit of a lone voice in that.
Mm-hmm. I suppose kind of touching on that Stronger In campaign, obviously you kind of pulled together everybody from a Northern Ireland perspective. Did it have a core strategy, or did you have to develop that strategy, or did you lean on GB strategy and adapt it?
We couldn't lean on GB. For a start, the slogan that they were going to use was inappropriate for Northern Ireland. It would not have carried. So we were the Stronger In campaign rather than even using the term Northern Ireland. We didn't stay there. Plus the fact is they had a very poor understanding of Northern Ireland in general, and it became more transparent as the campaign went on. I felt very isolated as a regional chair at the central committees. We developed our own strategy, our own messages, our own literature, and stuff. And I mean, it was a difficult time because sometimes they were sending you over people you didn't want. I mean, I didn't want Tony Blair in Northern Ireland because of the history of the war, but he was sent in as a double act with John Major, and John Major stole the show because the meeting that took place in Derry.
That's right, yeah.
In the McGee University, and Major was fantastic. I remember a question coming up from a member of the audience saying, usually the elite, you're the establishment, whatever, and Blair went to answer it, and John Major just tapped him on the knee and said, well, as someone who grew up in a 2-bedroom house in Brixton, I think I'm better placed to answer that question. So there were lighthearted moments in it. People worked very hard. The young people in particular were very motivated in Northern Ireland. And respect to the DUP and the TUV, most young people were not on their side on this debate.
Yeah. So you've kind of touched on kind of where things fell short. I suppose from a local perspective, you clearly won the Remain vote in Northern Ireland based on the referendum result. How did you achieve that?
Well, you say I won the referendum vote. Yes, we won it, but it was a bit like winning the lottery and then losing the ticket because as the results came in from Britain, you felt very deflated. I feel deflated to this day about that. We won. I think we could have probably done better. There was a degree of apathy. I mean, West Belfast had a very low turnout, right. 47%. Unionist areas had a very high turnout, but not necessarily in the way that the Unionists who campaigned to leave thought, because North Down became one of the strongest, Stronger In campaigns. So, I mean, it was interesting to see and to campaign on something that actually transcended sectarian politics in Northern Ireland. That was a first.
Interesting. I suppose touching on that, we heard many warnings from the Remain campaign at the time. Have any of those been borne out, or were those fears overstated 10 years on?
I don't think the fears were overstated in relation to Northern Ireland. If you threaten the Good Friday Agreement by breaching the European Court of Human Rights, then you have a fundamental flaw in your strategy for Brexit. and the British politicians involved did not factor that in, and they were in a rollback position ever since. I think Sinn Féin were wrong right after the election to jump and appropriate the vote of Remain in Northern Ireland and try to translate that into United Ireland vote. It was premature, and it had a contradictory effect, I think, for many unionists who didn't see their unionism compromised by being in Europe. But if all of a sudden, if you're going to take that vote and steal it and then say it's actually a sign that you want to be in United Ireland, that was a mistake. And I think that that has been a continued mistake for Sinn Féin. And there has been no real outreach to the unionist community, albeit we find ourselves in the hybrid situation of being in and out of Europe at the same time.
No, I suppose, we can touch on the Windsor framework in a second, but I suppose if we look at Brexit 10 years on, has it changed the fundamental nature of politics in Northern Ireland, but also on a north, south, east, west basis, on your perspective?
Well, as you know, I drafted a document on recalibrating British-Irish relations for the current government before they went into power, and it had a shattering effect on British-Irish relations. I mean, the Irish and British governments met around 3,000 times a year at official level and political level, and that was just wiped out with Brexit. Personal relationships got in the way as well. Leo Varadkar had a very testy, and Simon as well, both had very testing relationships with their British counterparts. The whole sort of far right in British politics didn't grasp the Irish dimension at all. And
still haven't.
And still haven't. And Northern Ireland, it didn't really change the game that much within Northern Ireland because we still have the tribal guidelines that we stick rigidly to. And I don't think it gave an initial boost to alliance, I think, but that has faded as well. The more the local government in Northern Ireland is exposed to the public, the less they like it.
I think that's another podcast we could do, Tom. But I suppose, you've touched on kind of our tribal politics. Do you think the public in Northern Ireland, have those attitudes changed based on Brexit? Has Brexit evolved politics here? And if so, in what direction?
For the people who don't want to be convinced of the truth, I think that they have remained within their particular areas. The DUP have been outflanked now by the TUV, who keep talking about the sea border. In reality, I think the day-to-day life of most people in Northern Ireland would like to see us back into Europe full. I think if we had a referendum tomorrow, you'd be looking somewhere between 65 and 70% of a yes vote in Northern Ireland at this stage. Partly because it hits people in their back pockets. That was a big part of it. It also hit people in terms of being able to move about. And you saw the explosion in terms of the number of people applying to have Irish passports. So, I mean, I think for those who are entrenched, it made them more entrenched on both sides. For people generally who wanted to see their lives improve and be better, I think that they took the opportunity that was afforded by the withdrawal agreement, by being able to avail of an Irish passport, and now that the British government are starting to sort of recalibrate relationships with Europe, their kids are even able to participate in Erasmus.
That's right. So I suppose we have seen a kind of a rollback, albeit we're not part of the institutions. No. I suppose we'll jump ahead, but you've kind of touched on kind of that recalibration with the European Union under Prime Minister Burnham. Should we expect a closer relationship with the EU in the coming months ahead? Are we expecting any sudden shift from the Starmer premiership?
I don't think there'll be a huge shift. I mean, Starmer was actually quite good on international relations. He has recalibrated relationships with the EU. He has used defence as a sort of landing bridge to get him in there. He's in Ukraine today. I think that Burnham will go slowly. I think eventually, before this term of government's up, he will more strategically lay out a framework for recalibrating with Europe, because he knows that that's how you get the Green vote back. The Labour people who have drifted off to the Green Party will come back with a more pro-European stance. But he is also conscious as a Northern Mayor that a lot of the northern towns are the people, older populations, who voted for Brexit. And he'll be conscious of that as well. But ultimately, because they have watched voters hemorrhage to the left and the right, the hemorrhage to the left has been more damaging to Labour, this current Labour government, and I think he'll want to bring that back. So the Lib Dems and the Green Party will be his focus in terms of getting soft Labour back. And younger voters as well.
Yeah. So no surprises expected imminently on the kind of the EU-UK reset that we're hearing. There's a big conference coming up in the coming weeks. No surprises out of that you don't expect?
I don't think so. Okay. He'll have to spend his time getting himself known by the people he's dealing with. Like Andy Burnham's well known by people on this side of the water, but he'll be less well known by a lot of European counterparts. And the last time they were in government was 14 years ago, so he's not going to be like a fresh face, an old face, an old friend coming back to them in Europe.
Great. I suppose, and hypothetically speaking, should the UK government, from your perspective, be thinking more ambitiously about its relationship with the EU? As with 10 years on from Brexit, you've touched on the war in Europe and Ukraine. There have been massive changes afoot. Should the UK government be looking more centrally at the EU?
I think the problem for the UK is that they're schizophrenic, politically schizophrenic, in that they don't seem to want to be part of Europe, but they don't want to be excluded from Europe either. You know, it's obviously their main holiday destination. It's, you know, it is their closest trading partner as well. But I think that they have this dilemma, and it's an island mentality. Whereas Ireland has been on the fringes of Europe and the fringes of the Western world, it has looked to make partnerships historically, gone back even to monastic days with Europe and to set up its relations with Europe. England has always been apart, and it's English nationalism that is driving the argument now. That's not to say that Scotland and Wales will not start to make their own overtures, the way Northern Ireland has with a Welsh office in Brussels or a Scottish office in Brussels.
So then jumping back to the Brexit referendum, and I suppose the 10 years since, I suppose what we saw during the referendum was the limitations of kind of that traditional political campaigning into a more fragmented and volatile electorate. Are we going to see that continue in the next 10 years, or are we going to see those traditional voters come back to the Tories, to Labour, to Lib Dems?
I don't think there's a route back in the same size of blocks between the main political parties. I think we are going to emerge with a much more European model.
So coalition
governments for the foreseeable future. I think you're probably seeing the last government with a massive majority. I think that even if reform were to be successful, which I don't think they will be, they would still have to have a coalition with someone, probably the Tories or Restore. And I think that coalition governments are the way forward. And they're not necessarily a bad thing, because look, Belgium didn't have a government for 24 months. It didn't collapse. The world does go on even without government. We had no government for 2 years.
Mandatory coalition doesn't necessarily get government.
So, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's mandatory or voluntary. The bottom line is that you have to deliver. In our case, it doesn't matter whether they deliver, but in a voluntary coalition, it does matter if they deliver. So they will have to pursue an agenda which delivers to the public. But I don't think you're going to see these massive big majorities coming back. And British politics is completely fractured now anyway. I mean, I expect the SNP to rout Labour from Westminster at the next election.
To go back to 56, 57.
Something like that. 50 seats plus, yeah.
Interesting. So the days are gone where we have one party in power. You're expecting a far looser coalition.
Absolutely. I mean, Labour have a massive majority. Massive majorities are not necessarily good for governments anyway.
Well, we saw under Starmer he couldn't get the welfare changes through. Yeah. So, those days are gone.
You don't have enough jobs to give out.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to. You have 200 odd jobs to give out, and then you're left with 200 people who are sitting scratching their behinds. And they get disgruntled, they want to make a bit of noise. You're better with a majority of 30 to 50. And that's why a voluntary coalition is more likely to stick together. Look how the Republic is sticking together with the independents. Now, it helps in the Republic that a lot of those independents come from the same DNA as the two mainstream parties. Most of them have been former members of those parties. But in British politics, I think you'll see coalitions. I mean, one council in Britain has already seen the Tories link up with the Greens.
That's right.
To stop reform.
That's right.
So God knows what the outcome of an election would be. I mean, they say down south they're already looking towards the Social Democrats as a potential partner instead of Fianna Fáil for Fine Gael.
Yeah. Interesting. And I suppose, just to wrap up this, I suppose, we've talked briefly on that kind of the Anglo-Irish element. What are Burnham's credentials on a kind of a Northern Ireland Irish perspective? Does he have history here? Obviously, he was previously in the Blair Brown government 14 plus years ago. Does he have history here?
Well, he will have collective memory of the Good Friday Agreement, which is something that has been missing from the Cameron era right through to near enough now. I mean, Starmer's big plus in all of this was that he had been involved with the New Start to Policing here as a human rights advisor. So Burnham will be coming with a collective memory of the effort that it took to deliver the Good Friday Agreement and will be more keen to defend it maybe than anybody who's about at the moment. But then I think his main priority is where his votes are, and I think he's going to have to spend a lot of time winning hearts and minds in Britain and particularly the north of England.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for joining us, Tom.